Here again is another Explorer tape taken from the recording files of the Monroe Institute. This particular session is important to us for several reasons. First, the time. This report, or communication, took place in January 1981. Second, a change. In 8 years of working with this particular member of our Explorer team, whom we code MJL, she moved into a different state of consciousness, far different than any she had previously achieved. Finally, the quality of the Explorer herself. We obviously know her well. With her doctorate in psychology, she has been in clinical and private practice for over 20 years. Keep all of these in mind and listen. MJL, isolated in the darkened check unit, is somewhere past focus 15.
Hans and I walked up a path after we greeted each other, a very, very steep path to the top of a very high mountain. The top of the world. Now we're just sitting, looking down at all of the other mountains.
How is he?
He's fine. He was so glad to see me.
Very good.
We're just sitting up here, looking down.
Ask Hans if he would like to answer some questions we've thought up for him.
Says fine.
Ask him what it's like to be where he is. What is his existence like?
He says that mostly it's a comfortable feeling in the sense of what a human would feel who is in tune with his surroundings. That feelings are different for him because he has no body sensations in the same fashion that human beings have feelings, but it is on a continuum, so that he does have some similarity, and he does not have the words that clearly distinguish. For example, he may speak of frustration because our understanding of what frustration is would best describe what he is experiencing at a given time. Or he might use a word such as balanced, which would mean his experience of his existence corresponds to what we mean as human beings when we say balanced. So with this preface, Hans says there is a part of his existence that becomes somewhat difficult when he has charges whom he cannot reach because they are too busy and cluttered. But when he's able to break through and have some measure of connection with those persons whom he is working for and with, then his existence seems to flow. He says that he has a purpose and a meaningful participation in the whole of existence, in a similar way to the human participation, that he is in a different plane, a different rung of the ladder, so to speak, but it is still a continuum. He says, is there something more specific we want him to respond to?
Yes, and thank him for that participation. But he mentioned the question of frustration. Does he experience emotion?
He says he does not experience emotion in the same way that humans experience emotion, but he was a human and he has a memory, so that when the various experiences react within him, it is like tuning in to a memory bank, and there is a reflection, like a reflection of an emotion. He says we must remember that emotions are tied in with the physical body. But the mental body has a reflection of the emotion. He has those reflections that come like waves. So he can recognize there is a different state, but it is not attached to him in the same way that our emotions are attached to us.
Then his emotions, he acts upon the reflections, or does emotion in any way, that reflection, cause him to act or perform in a certain way, such as it often does with us humans?
He says they serve as a motivating energy. So, yes, in a way, they cause him to act somewhat differently, but remember, in a more detached manner. It is like he feels a nudging, a mental pushing, extra awareness of a need to move slightly this way or that in his work. Do you understand?
Yes, I perceive what he means. Does he in turn carry with him, as he is now, all of the memory when he was human? Is it recallable to him at will?
Yes, but it is not interfering in the sense that, yes, he can recall if it is appropriate, but it does not hang about, so to speak. It does not clutter, interfere.
Yes, that's very good. He used the term charges and making, getting in touch with his charges. This infers that he is charged with making such communication. How did he obtain such charges?
He says, at his level of development, he is a part of a planning team that assumes responsibility for certain spiritual improvements that it is as if his team members are responsible for the spiritual development of a certain segment of humans, and also they have responsibilities for other entities who are not human, but who are not developed to their level.
How did he join this team? How did he come to be a member of it?
He rather laughs and says, "We have been buddies for centuries. We have been in the world together, and we have been in the nothingness together. We are one, truly one." I mean by that we are a part of the greater one, but more closely a part of one another. When the great movement took place, the great splitting off of the parts, we were one, and we divided into our present individual parts.
Then I therefore find it very intriguing to ask what he means by when the great movement took place.
He says, we were all one body of energy. We contained all of the planets, all of life, he does not know the precipitation, but he knows there was a breaking off of the sun and the moon and the planets. And he, for a while, was a part of the sun energy. There was not always an individual consciousness in the sense of an understanding and intelligence, although the great universal intelligence always existed. The mental processes as we know them today developed when it was necessary for them to be in terms of a system, in terms of an organized, structured pattern. All he is sure of is that each particle of matter is important, and each particle has its place and its duty or responsibility. Each reacts on the other. And he recalls a time when his particular combinations of energy matter seemed to exist in a separate kind of space, as a unit that could think and reason, and that at the time when humans were developed, this entity split again into five different parts. These subsequently have become what he earlier referred to as a team. As they split apart, they developed different attributes.
Did they stay in communication with each other?
Yes, but not always in direct communication when they were human beings when they were inhabiting human bodies. They had only a slight amount of communication in a direct form.
I see. That's very interesting. Then, did they all inhabit human bodies at the same period of time as we know time?
Some experiences have been thus. Some have been experiences in which one or other of the team would inhabit a human body.
Is any member of the team inhabiting a human body at this point in our time?
This is very interesting. It is as if Hans has turned his back on that question.
All right.
An impression came of yes, no. I questioned again, and he says, it is not for you to know.
Very good. If that is important, then we will not push the question. Another thing that he mentioned was that they were responsible for non-human entities. When he says that, of what is he speaking?
Entities who have left the human body but are not yet self-sufficient and self-directed on another plane. He says the concept in the church called purgatory is something like what he refers to, although other concepts connected with guilt and punishment are incorrect.
Then these have been humans.
I did not hear the question.
Then these non-human have been at one time inhabiting a human body.
These particular non-humans have been in bodies, but he says there are energy forms that have not been a part of human or animal or plant life as we know it.
Do these, of which he just mentioned, do they have intelligence such as humans purportedly have?
These entities are split off parts of the greater whole of energy, and if it were needed for balance of the system, for these entities to develop all qualities of a system as we know it, the seeds are there.
Can he communicate with such if he so desired now?
He says it is possible, but in their plane, persons are single-mindedly attentive to their own responsibilities, and this is out of the area of his and his team's responsibility.
Very good. If he were to, in what direction does he try to help his charges move? What pattern does he try to help them form?
He says that he must begin by helping each to understand emotionally as well as mentally the place where the individual is at the present moment. Then he helps the person to begin to appreciate the things of this world and this life, and feel a stewardship for his body and his environment, and then be ready to let go of any attachment. The attachments are the major problems, the major blocks to spirituality. Even the attachment to what we call religion and religious practice is a stumbling block to spirituality. Once he is able to help the individual to let go of attachments, there is only bliss and joy and harmony.
How does he help his charges do this?
He has a way of becoming one those individuals at times, so that a flash will seem to go through the mind, the understanding, a flash of an idea or a tendency to follow a path or a pattern. In other words, he uses all that is available in the world, people and situations and emotions, so that there is a myriad of ways in which he works, but mainly it is in the process of identification with the entity. But this is only very briefly, so that as the entity develops, the entity will begin to know that this kind of inspiration comes. The inspiration is at the moment of the identification.
That is very good. What then, is there any relationship to his communication during the period that what we call sleep?
He says there are many times when he can communicate directly during sleep. It is a different form of communication, that there is a type of dream state in which the entity with whom he works, such as myself, moves more into an understanding of Hans's existence, and moves with him to work in another plane. This work in another plane then reflects on the work that is being done on the earth plane, so that it is a cooperative venture.
We would like also, just to interject, to more fully understand why we need to sleep. What is the purpose of this sleep that we humans do?
He says the purpose from the universal standpoint is to maintain the connection, to maintain this cooperation between entities at different levels of development and on different planes, but that also there is a purpose in terms of the physical body, a purpose for releasing built up tensions and pressures in the human body. He says that there is a development level that can be reached so that those tensions will not build up. And at that level, the only purpose would be to maintain the communication and interconnection with the other planes of existence.
That's very good. We're glad to know that. He spoke of emotions in a great deal. Where does what we label love fit into this pattern? Is that an emotion or something beyond that? Love.
Love is a larger concept than the love we usually experience in the human state. Love in the universal sense is a kind of brotherhood, the concept of unity, the concept of wanting, needing to reunify the energy. But in the greater sense, in the universal sense, this is an objective rather than a subjective experience. In the human condition, love is one of the emotions that are part of the attachments, such as fear and hate and anger and joy.
Sorry to interrupt, but we've run out of time on this side of the cassette. To continue, turn your cassette over to side 2. Then in those also attachments is our concept of good and evil. Is that more or less a local human custom?
One says it is very difficult for him to explain because it does not exist. It is a misinterpretation, but a necessary misinterpretation because of the way the human development has progressed. And he says perhaps he really means regressed instead of progressed, because there was once an understanding that all that exists in energy is perfection in the sense of being positive, or what we call right and good, and the idea that some part of this energy is a negative or bad is only an interpretation that there are two sides of an existence. And how can one say that the heads on a coin are right and the tails on that same coin are wrong?
I use, for example, some of the patterns that our religions have developed. For example, the question of the one that simply comes forth. What is the pattern if one were to, say, physically kill another individual, another human? Is this, there is no good or evil to this then, is that correct?
One says this is very difficult to explain in human terms, but he will silently concentrate so he can try to explain to me so that I can explain to you what this means. We will be quiet for a bit.
Very good. Time lapse 3 minutes.
He shows me little round hard bits of matter like metal balls, small balls that are discolored and they need to be shined. They need to go through an abrasive process to be polished because they were intended to be bright. And the process of polishing is done by other particles that exist for the purpose of polishing. And he sees that I do not draw the connection fully, so he will try in another way.
Very good. Time lapse 1 minute.
He says he has tried to show me, and I have had flashes, but they do not seem to be meaningful, but that the problem is the phraseology, the terminology that exists in the human condition. We must move out of it and let go of the naming when we need to look at this issue. This issue is larger than the human condition can assimilate, but he says there is a state beyond this condition in which we understand that each act has a meaning in relationship to each other act, and that one act cannot be called good and one act bad, but it is only a process that all of the energy must go through, that there is a cause and effect relationship existing, and when we pull out a segment like a human being killing another human being, if this has to be labeled, then the only way it could be labeled is that this is the dark side, this is the destructive side, as opposed to the light. That is why we have the good and bad labels. But again, he says, in the true reality, when one is able to objectively view all of what exists at the same time, then there are no labels. There is just process, existence. That is a stage of development. He leaves me puzzled, and he says, "This is all I am able to impart to you with your limited ability to understand."
Tell him we appreciate very much this attempt, at the least. In that same, or rather, let's turn momentarily for another direction and see if we can get another type of understanding. In the terms of existence as humans, are there humans who in turn in their own existence now, as they are now, are there some that are identifiable? Can we identify those who are very spiritual people? What are the characteristics that will let us identify a person who is very spiritual and very spiritually evolved?
He has, while you were asking that question, Hans was giving me more insight into the previous question.
Very good.
Let me see if I can pass it through. It's only an enigmatic concept that will help over time to understand the good-evil terminology. In the example you gave of one human being killing the other, it is the one who kills who is dead. We have a misinterpretation when we fully understand this part of the concept, we will be one step closer to understanding the whole.
We will attempt to do it.
Now he says he will attempt to respond to the question of the more highly developed individuals in the earth. As there are very few individuals who have let go of the physical attachments.
Are there any that we know of, that we are aware of?
He says these individuals may appear to us from time to time, but they do not remain a part of our lives. It is as if they walk in the form of an ordinary person and give a message, give a needed example, and then move on. These highly developed individuals do not find themselves in the form of powerful, influential, famous persons. We seldom know their names.
is there anyone in man's history, the history that we know, that has existed?
He says, beside those whom we already know about, such as Buddha, Muhammad, Christ Jesus, and some of their immediate followers, there have been those who remain nameless, and at times there have been more of the highly developed entities on the earth.
All right, yes, thank you. Thank him for me. He expressed that the viewpoint where all time is available to him. From that perspective, as of our time now, and looking in the time just ahead of us, what does it appear to him from his viewpoint? What are the major events that look to be in our near time, within our physical lifetime? What do they look to be?
The first word that comes through is chaos, chaotic times ahead, and I ask him to be specific. I see buildings rocking, buildings cracking, buildings hitting each other, and screams, terrible screams. I see large bodies of water rising up, engulfing whole cities, crashing down, waves crashing down, lifting up houses as if they were little flecks of dust. But as I am being shown these two major tragic events, strangely enough, I am utterly detached from them. I wonder, why do I not feel emotionally involved? It seems as if beneath or behind or beyond this chaotic condition, a more perfect form of existence exists. It's as if this were all part of the cleansing process.
In what time frame does this take place, and what is the cause of it?
I will try to stand back and set up a sort of distance from me for events that will be 10 or more years in the future, and judge on the basis of the closeness of the events to me. It appears that these events are very close rather than beyond 10 years. I cannot exactly pinpoint dates, but it feels so close that as I focus, it's almost as if it is over. I do not understand this way of expressing that is being shown to me. I will ask specifically, the answer I get is that the chaos is already in operation. The treachery of man to man, and particularly the treachery that is being perpetrated on innocent children, is a forerunner of the more large earth chaotic conditions. There is a necessary cleansing process, but the time is not fixed. It is happening at a regular pace. One thing follows another. The earth is already shaking. The events are taking place in a pattern that has long been established.
I see. Mm-hmm.
What I see clearly is that within the 10-year period, the worst will be over. There will be quiet again, and peace, and a new beginning.
Appreciate very much the help that Hans has given you and given me too. And I think now that we should probably let you return now and thank Hans so much for participating in our quiz, as it were.
Hans says there is another message that those of us who are expected to cope with the changes, to continue to be a part of the human condition throughout the changes, will be given extra strength and encouragement, and that much inner work must be done, much cleansing work must be done to prepare for the apocalypse.
He will help us do this, I hope.
He says we will mainly have to help ourselves and each other, but he continues to help, and all of those on his plane continue to help to open our awareness and our understanding. He says he will leave us now.
Thank him so much for his participation with us, and we hope to meet him again in the very near future according to our time. And perhaps we can explore other things.
There is something I wish to report. It is not from Hans.
All right.
But there has been an effort, an attempt on the part of other extraterrestrial beings to make contact. I have not fully given my permission. When they have attempted to make contact before, I have made it clear that I only want contact from those beings who come from the one whom I regard as God. That is all.
Why would they like to contact you? Do you know?
There is a feeling of caution on my part, as if some of these beings may wish to use my body for purposes of their own, and I am not certain these are the most high-level purposes.
Could not Hans tell you about this or guide you in this if at any time you decided to consider it?
Hans has come back and seems to be rather shrugging his shoulders.
All right. Yes. Which can mean anything, can it
Yes.
not? Mm-hmm.
Almost as if you were saying there are times when you are on your own. I do not fully believe this. I feel as if it is more of a tool he is using to give me more discrimination, to help me develop my own discrimination. But I fully believe he and others remain with me.
I suspect they do. Mm-hmm. So are you ready to return now?
Yes.
All right, I will give you some nice beta signal and what else I can find. Debrief, debrief. How you doing?
Fine.
And do you remember all of that?
Not all of it.
I wondered how much of it you remembered. Did you find it interesting what you remembered?
What I remembered was the part about the waves, and I remembered the imagery. I did not have very much imagery.
Do you that's the, you just remember the wave then?
Mm-hmm.
It was indeed a very interesting session. I wish I'd had some gauges on you for this one.
I was very deep.
I know you were. This is about as deep as I remember you being. And that's why I wondered how do you feel now, all right?
I'm not all the way back, but I feel fine. I don't feel anything.
Don't feel anything.
No.
Well,
I mean, I don't feel bad. I don't feel good. I'm just getting reacquainted with my body.
I suspect so. I didn't know whether you had the most unusual voice delivery I've ever heard you do.
Really?
Someday I'll play it back for you.
All right.
It's really hard to describe. It's not the you that I know anyway. It won't be the you that you know either.
Well, each time I began to talk, this time I felt my body vibrate. It was as if a question would be asked, and then this entity would inhabit my body. It was different from when I would just ask and get an answer and say the answer. Although it was happening, I was two people at the same time. And
we're getting close to it now.
yeah. But at the same time, I was feeling as if I were another entity. So it was as if the entity and I were merged together. And there was still the filtering process going on through me, but it was in a very different way.
Yeah, you can say that 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
You would not recognize your own voice.
Mm-hmm. It was very strange, the part about the chaos. Okay, I can see the buildings, just tall. They were tall buildings cracking and falling down. and I saw the wave very clearly. Huge waves, terrifying waves. And yet I kept wondering why I didn't feel upset. And it seemed to be happening. Whatever I was experiencing it at the time it was happening, that's why it was so difficult to separate that time from this time. So I never really got any sense of time. But I didn't have a personal sense of being in it. Like I was watching it. Which could mean that that is a case that I will not be in it, so to speak. But it may not be. It may be I'll be gone already by the time it takes place.
Well, that's one implication, yes.
But it didn't have the sense of my actually being inside of a building falling down or in one of the houses that was being washed away by the wave.
Yeah, it's hard.
I didn't have a drowning feeling or a burning feeling or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it can't. I think it's more that perspective, because when you are in that particular state, you have dropped those emotional patterns that are your characteristic. I think that's quite true. I find that very often.
I didn't feel, sad or upset. I just marveled that I didn't. It was strange. It was just like the whole business of the right and wrong, whatever the words were, I have no idea, but I know it was like, it was a frustrating thing to have to try to describe something that couldn't be described, and yet none of it made any difference. It was like so if a person kills a person, they kill a person. So, there wasn't any kind of feeling like I'd feel now.
Yes, that's what I mean. And I think this is that characteristic that you've also had in the past. But this is about as deep as I've ever seen you, and by all means. And I say sometime, but not tonight or whatever. I'll play the tape for you.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to get out of this contraption now.
Okay.
And there you have it. Certainly much to ponder and too much for immediate comment. I could say that, how does it go? The opinions and material you've just heard are those only of the explorer and do not necessarily represent those of... But that's not so, is it? Only the explorer? Anyway, this is Robert Monroe saying, I'll see you around, I hope.